Hello, my name is Jaru, and today we're talking about Deltarune. Or to be more precise, we will be talking about the Black Deer, and the incredible foreshadowing that I believe she brings to this story. But first, what is the Black Deer? Well, it's a bit complicated. If you've played the Sword Route, aka the Shadow Mantle NES game, then you should recognize this room. There's a black monster standing across a pit, and it perfectly mirrors your movements. You can't attack it directly, so instead you press a button. And then something strange happens. Instead of you controlling Chris and the enemy mimicking us, we are now exclusively controlling the black monster. And when you guide it towards Chris, it is killed automatically. Now, whether it was the real Chris who chose to attack or the NES Chris is unclear, but given that the Chris down here doesn't flinch or move in any way, suggests that this attack was launched by the NES Chris on their own. And that's it. The black monster dies, we continue with the dungeon, and we never think about it again. Simple, right? Well, not so much. You see, when people started digging around in the code, they found something unusual, a hidden variable tied to this encounter labeled Toriel. And under normal conditions, this variable is always set to true. But if you manually switch it to false, something changes. The black monster's sprite becomes a black deer. And that's the only change that occurs. The sequence plays out exactly the same otherwise. The only difference is the sprite used to represent this monster. If you'd like a full breakdown of how this works, I recommend checking out this video. They do a really good job of breaking down the mechanics of how the code works in this scene. But, of course, we now must ask, what is the meaning of this Black Deer sprite? Well, the Sword Route is basically one massive pile of foreshadowing, so it's likely that this sequence is an important clue. However, what exactly it is foreshadowing is a matter of debate. This is partially because, depending on how you interpret it, the Sword Route could be foreshadowing the past, the future, the normal route, the weird route, Undertale, Deltarune, or all of the above. Even with that ambiguity, there are a couple of popular readings that have been widely accepted by the community. Namely, most folks assume this Black Deer is a stand-in for December, and I am inclined to agree. However, it is here where me and the community diverge quite a bit. You see, most folks subscribe to the theory that the Roaring Night is December, and thus they see this sequence through that lens. They see a black monster who is revealed to be a black deer and conclude that this is further proof that December is the Roaring Night. However, I don't agree. If you've seen my Asriel's Dust 2.0 video, you'll know that I am not a believer in Death's Night theory. In fact, I believe something much more radical. You see, I believe that December is the true protagonist of Deltarune, and that her soul has been absorbed by Chris. As such, I was never going to read the scene as foreshadowing of December being the Roaring Night. However, I can hear you say, if that is not what this scene is foreshadowing, then what does it actually mean? And honestly, that question really stumped me. As confident as I am in my theories, this sequence really does seem like foreshadowing of Death being the Roaring Night, at least on the surface, and that troubled me enough that I almost reconsidered throwing my weight behind Asriel's Dust 2.0. But then, after careful analysis, this scene finally clicked. I realized that rather than being a huge problem for my December theory, this sequence is actually some of the strongest evidence in favor of my conclusion. What do I mean? Well, let's break it down. First, and most importantly, is its emphasis on control. You see, the core idea of my December theory is that we are not directly controlling Chris. We are instead controlling December's spirit within Chris, and it is through her that we can control Chris's body. In other words, we are controlling two entities at once, Chris and December. And what does this sequence have us do? It has us control both Chris and the Black Deer. This is the only time in the sword route where we control something other than Chris, and the one time we do, it's December. Curious, isn't it? But wait, there's more. Another important part of my theory is that December died because of something Chris did in the past. And how does this sequence end? With Chris, completely independently of our control, killing the Black Deer. And then, only after the deer is dead do we regain control of Chris. Almost as if the deer and our control over her has been absorbed into Chris. But wait, there's even more. Beyond what we do with these characters, there's also the fascinating detail of what the Black Deer is. You see, for my December theory to function, it is necessary that December be a boss monster, because only boss monsters have souls that can persist long enough to be absorbed by humans. Why is that relevant? Well, go ahead and take a closer look at the sword route enemies. Many other people have pointed out how they seem to resemble familiar characters. The lizard evokes Alphys, the fish evokes Undyne, the bird evokes Birdly, and then there are these two sprites, which are commonly interpreted as Asgore and Toriel. This is supported by the fact that we find the yellow monster in a room full of flowers, and it even seems to be colored after Asgore's yellow hair. Those details together make it clear that these two sprites are symbols for boss monsters. And when we reach the Black Deer, what form does it normally take? That's right, a black version of the exact same boss monster sprite. Folks have put so much emphasis on her becoming the Black Deer that we forgot to analyze the significance of her regular sprite. And that sprite seems to imply, at least to me, that December too is a boss monster. And that's not all. Next, we need to talk about the significance of the Toriel variable. And my friends, this part is very interesting. You see, given what occurs in Chapter 3, it's clear that Toriel has a lot more going on than meets the eye, as it's revealed that even the simple act of her waking up would prove catastrophic for Tenna's plans. Her waking up is also seen as being terrible for the Roaring Night, as rather than hastily grabbing her the way it does with Undyne, it instead uses this much gentler beam, as if it's intentionally trying to avoid waking her up. This implies that Toriel knows a lot more than she lets on, and as long as the Toriel variable remains true, the identity of this monster is obscured. But the moment that the Toriel variable is switched to false, the Black Deer's true identity is revealed. And given that this scene seems to be recreating the moment when Chris caused December's death, I would argue that this is implying that Toriel knows something about what happened to Des, and she is intentionally covering it up because she knows it likely involved Chris. It may seem out of character at glance, but at the end of the day, Toriel is Toriel, and she values nothing more than she values her family. Of course, she would want to protect her child. This may also be why she shows such contempt for Asgore's investigation into December's disappearance, assuming that's what she's talking about in this scene. And given that we start Chapter 2 with this flashback to Toriel discovering Chris with a knife followed by her screaming in dismay, it's quite feasible that this is Toriel finding Chris immediately after December's death. And that's not even talking about what we discover from the Shadow Mantle Holder, also known as Eram. You see, at the end of the sword route, Eram taunts Chris by bringing up their enjoyment and capacity for violence. That kind of accusation doesn't come out of nowhere. It implies history, a violent history. And unless that history predates Chris's adoption, then the most likely target for their violence was December. This is precisely what is being hinted at by the Chapter 4 Egg Room, and it is what is being explicitly portrayed by the death of the black deer. And that's it for today's video. Please let me know what y'all think down below. I know the Roaring Knight interpretation is more popular, but unless we expect to play as the Roaring Knight at some point, I think my reading is a more complete explanation of the Black Deer sequence. Of course, I could be missing something, so I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And of course, I must express my appreciation for all my wonderful supporters on Patreon. A special thanks goes to E-Roll, Ash the Fox, Limping Penguin, Tibby Fitzhugh, and Spampton PFP for supporting me on the Noel tier. An extra special shout out goes to Sans the Reaper for supporting me on the Ralsei tier. And a huge shout out goes to Spindrift and Lex.Ham for being the only big shots willing and able to support me on the Spampton tier. I hope you lovely people are enjoying these shorter projects while I work on the bigger videos, and I hope I can continue to entertain you as we delve deeper and deeper into Deltarune's darker yet darker mysteries. Like if you enjoyed the video, comment if you've got something to say, subscribe if you want to see more, and as always, have a fantastic day.